How does a person disappear from a commercial airliner while being trailed by military jets? In 1971, a man known to the world as D.B. Cooper executed a plan so precise and so bold that it baffled the FBI for over 40 years. From the quiet exchange in seat 18E to the desperate search through the Washington wilderness, the trail has gone cold, leaving behind only a clip-on tie and a handful of fingerprints. In today's video, we will explore the evidence, the theories, and the enduring legend of the hijacker who chose a leap into the unknown over a life in the light. Before we continue, make sure to like the video and subscribe to the channel. And let's dive into the man who started it all. It started in the most ordinary way. On November 24th, 1971, a man walked up to the counter at Portland International Airport and paid cash for a one-way ticket. The flight was short, just 30 minutes from Portland to Seattle. On the ticket, he wrote the name Dan Cooper. Nothing about him stood out at first. Witnesses described a man in his mid-40s, around 5 feet 10 inches to 6 feet tall, with dark hair and brown eyes. He wore a business suit, a white shirt, a thin black tie, and a raincoat. Calm, clean, ordinary. He carried a black attaché case and a brown paper bag. He boarded Northwest Orient Airlines Flight 305, a Boeing 727, and quietly took seat 18E in the last row. There were 36 passengers and 6 crew members on board. The plane took off on schedule at 2:50 p.m. Shortly after takeoff, he ordered a drink, bourbon and 7-Up. Nothing unusual, no sudden moves, no tension. Just a man blending in perfectly among strangers, waiting for the right moment. But this wasn't random. Every detail, from the seat choice to the timing, felt deliberate. And within minutes of takeoff, the calm turned into something far more serious. Not long after the plane was in the air, the man made his move, but not in a way anyone expected. He quietly handed a note to a flight attendant. At first, she didn't even read it. It looked like something harmless. But then he leaned in and said something that instantly changed everything. "Miss, you'd better look at that note. I have a bomb." When she opened it, the message was clear and direct. "Miss, I have a bomb in my briefcase and want you to sit by me." He didn't go loud, not aggressive. He was moving with a plan. He opened his attaché case just enough to show what looked like a real device, wires, a battery, and red cylinders. It was enough to remove any doubt. Then came the demands. He wanted $200,000 in cash. Not later. Soon. He also asked for 4 parachutes, 2 main and 2 reserve. That detail mattered. It suggested he might force someone to jump with him, making it too risky for anyone to tamper with the equipment. The instructions were passed to the cockpit. The situation was now real, and while everyone else began to feel the pressure, he stayed calm, like this was all part of a plan. But what made this situation even more unsettling was how prepared he seemed to be. As the aircraft moved through the sky, something unusual happened. Instead of landing, the plane began circling the Seattle area for nearly 2 hours. This wasn't confusion. It was part of the plan. Time was being used to prepare everything he had asked for. Inside the cabin, he remained steady. He chose to communicate through one flight attendant, keeping control without raising panic. His tone stayed calm. At one point, while looking out the window, he casually said, "Looks like Tacoma down there." That one line showed something important. He knew the area. He also showed awareness of how things worked on the ground. When told the parachutes were coming from a nearby base, he immediately pointed out how close it was, understanding distances most people wouldn't think about mid-flight. There were 36 passengers still on board, unaware of the full situation. They were told there was only a minor delay. Meanwhile, everything behind the scenes was moving according to his instructions. Even during tense moments, he didn't rush. He didn't lose control. He waited. It felt less like a risky act and more like something carefully designed from the start. Then finally, after hours in the air, the plane was cleared to land, and the next phase began. At 5:46 p.m., the plane finally landed in Seattle. But this wasn't a normal arrival. It stopped on a partially lit runway far from the main terminal. Everything was done exactly the way he wanted, slow, controlled, and without sudden moves. A single airline representative approached the aircraft, carrying what had been demanded. Inside the bag was $200,000 in cash. 10,000 unmarked $20 bills weighing about 19 pounds. Along with it came 4 parachutes, gathered from different sources to meet his exact request. One by one, the steps were followed. The money was brought inside. The parachutes were handed over. Then, just as promised, he allowed the 36 passengers to leave the plane safely. The tension inside the cabin began to ease, but the situation was far from over. As he checked the money, something unexpected happened. In a quiet moment, he even offered some of it to a flight attendant. It was refused, but the gesture showed something unusual. He wasn't acting out of panic or anger. During a delay in refueling, he adjusted his plan. Using a knife, he cut into a parachute canopy and began packing the cash into it himself. Now, with the cabin nearly empty and night approaching, everything was set for the final move. At around 7:40 p.m., the aircraft took off again, this time with only 5 people on board, the hijacker and 4 crew members. The route was set toward Mexico City, with a planned stop in Reno, but the real plan was already in motion. He gave precise instructions for the flight. The plane had to stay at about 10,000 feet, fly as slow as possible, around 100 knots, and keep the landing gear down with flaps set to 15 degrees. These weren't random choices. They showed a clear understanding of how the aircraft worked. Soon after takeoff, he told the last flight attendant in the cabin to go to the cockpit and not return. Before she left, she saw him tying the money bag around his waist. A few minutes later, a warning light turned on. It showed that the rear air stair had been lowered mid-flight, something only possible on that type of aircraft. Around 8:13 p.m., the plane suddenly shifted upward, forcing the pilots to stabilize it. No one saw him leave. No signal, no sound, just silence. By the time the plane landed in Reno at 11:02 p.m., the rear stairs were still open, and when the crew finally checked the cabin, he was gone. What he left behind became the only clues to a mystery that still hasn't been solved. When the aircraft came to a stop in Reno at 11:02 p.m., authorities didn't rush in immediately. There was still uncertainty about what might be inside. Once it was cleared, the search began, and what they found only deepened the mystery. He was gone. No sign of him anywhere in the cabin, but he hadn't left empty-handed or completely clean. In seat 18E, a black clip-on tie was found, along with a tie clip. Nearby, 2 parachutes remained on board. One had been opened with 3 lines cut from it. The other was still intact. A total of 66 latent fingerprints were also recovered from different areas inside the aircraft. Along with that, small details began to surface, things he had missed or chosen to leave behind. Yet some of the most important items were never found. The parachute he used, gone. The money, gone. Even key personal traces that could have helped identify him were either missing or later lost over time. Everything pointed in 2 directions at once. He had planned carefully. But something about the escape still felt uncertain. The plane was quiet now. The passengers were safe. But the man who controlled everything just hours earlier had vanished without a trace. And that disappearance triggered one of the largest search efforts ever carried out for a single person. What followed was a search on a massive scale. The flight path stretched from Seattle to Reno, and large sections of Washington were combed in detail. Teams moved through dense forests, searched riverbanks, and even used helicopters to scan from above. The suspected landing area focused around remote parts of southwest Washington, including regions near the Lewis River and Mount St. Helens. But the conditions worked against everyone. It was night. The terrain was rough and heavily wooded. Weather conditions made it harder to narrow down exactly where he could have landed. Even the aircraft's speed and shifting wind directions made early estimates unreliable. Search teams spent weeks covering ground. In early 1972, around 200 soldiers joined the effort, along with air crews and civilian volunteers. They searched for 18 days in March. Jan then returned for another 18 days in April. Nothing meaningful was found. Aircraft retraced the route. Boats scanned deep waters. Even advanced surveillance flights failed due to poor visibility. Every possible angle was explored. Still no parachute, no body, no clear trail. Over time, new calculations shifted the possible landing zone, but each new theory led to the same result: nothing. Years passed, and the case remained open for decades. before being officially suspended in 2016. But just when it seemed like every lead had gone cold, something unexpected surfaced years later. For years, nothing connected directly to the hijacker was ever found outside the aircraft. Then, in 1980, almost 9 years later, something changed. An 8-year-old boy named Brian Ingram was digging along the Columbia River when he uncovered 3 bundles of cash. The total was $5,800. The bills were damaged, stuck together, and still held by rubber bands. When checked, the serial numbers matched the ransom money from the hijacking. Out of the original $200,000, this was the only portion ever recovered. But the discovery raised more questions than answers. The way the money was buried didn't fully match natural river movement. It appeared to have arrived there years after the hijacking, not immediately after the jump. Even the condition of the bills suggested they had not been moving freely in water the entire time. And the rest of the money? Never found. Never used. This led to 2 main possibilities. Either he didn't survive the jump, and the money was lost over time. Or he made it out, but something happened to the cash along the way. Even after 45 years of investigation, no identity was confirmed. No clear ending was ever proven. One man, one jump, and a mystery that still refuses to be solved. What happened that night didn't just create a mystery, it changed aviation forever. After this case, airports introduced metal detectors, baggage checks became standard, and passengers paying cash began receiving extra scrutiny. One man forced an entire system to evolve and then vanished without ever facing consequences. Decades later, his name still echoes through history, not because we know who he was, but because we don't. So what do you think? Was this a perfect escape plan down to the last detail? Or did it all go wrong the moment he stepped into the night? Comment your thoughts below. Don't forget to like the video if you want to watch more real crime cases, subscribe to the channel, and thanks for watching.